we just thought it was very fitting at the IMRP and the director Andrew Clark to also pay tribute to John Lewis, especially during this time of civil unrest in our nation. And so we're glad that you're able to join us. And we're going to be showing the 54-minute documentary here. It's a little longer than what we normally do. But we just thought that it was a great capturing of an 80-year lifetime. And it's hard to do that in a few short minutes. And so we're going to run a little bit longer. We'll be back. Probably, again, Josh has shared the PBS link on the chat screen. I see Rick saying it wants you to buy it. That didn't happen with when I clicked on it, and I've done it a number of times. So maybe you can try it another way. And if anything else comes up, we'll share it with you on the chat. So just if you have questions, concerns, send it there, and we'll try to address them. But we'll be playing it in a few short minutes, and then we're going to be joined by, again, Stan Simpson, who's been moderating our Theater Thursdays here at the IMRP since they started as Film Fridays. And we have some great guests with us today. Deacon Art Miller, Victoria Christgau, and Bill Dyson will be joining us, all with their own personal stories of John Lewis and the members of the civil rights movement. So, you know, what I thought I'd start with, if people hadn't seen it today, was the New York Times op-ed. He penned it before he passed, but he wanted it to be shared on the day of his funeral. That day just happens to be today. And if you all permit me, I just would like to read that. It'll be a few minutes. While my time here has now come to an end, I want you to know that in the last days and hours of my life, you inspired me. You filled me with hope about the next chapter of this great American story when you used your power to make a difference in our society. Millions of people, motivated simply by human compassion, laid down the burdens of division. Around the country and around the world, you set aside race, class, age, language, and nationality to demand respect for human dignity. That is why I had to visit Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington, though I was admitted to the hospital the following day. I just had to see and feel it for myself that, after many years of silent witness, the truth is still marching on. Emmett Till was my George Floyd. He was my Rashard Brooks, Sandra Bland, and Breonna Taylor. He was 14 when he was killed, and I was only 15 years old at the time. I will never, ever forget the moment when it became so clear that he could easily have been me. In those days, fear constrained us like an imaginary prison, and troubling thoughts of potential brutality committed for no understandable reason were the bars. Though I was surrounded by two loving parents, plenty of brothers, sisters, and cousins, their love could not protect me from the unholy oppression waiting just outside that family circle. Unchecked, unrestrained violence and government-sanctioned terror had the power to turn a simple stroll to the store for some Skittles and an innocent morning jog down to a lonely country road into a nightmare. If we are to survive as one unified nation, we must discover what so readily takes roots in our hearts that could rob Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina of her brightest and best, shoot unwitting concertgoers in Las Vegas, and choke to death the hopes and dreams of a gifted violinist like Elijah McClain. Like so many young people today, I was searching for a way out, or some might say a way in, and then I heard the voice of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on an old radio. He was talking about the philosophy and discipline of nonviolence. He said we were all complicit when we tolerate injustice. He said that it is not enough to say it will get better by and by. He said each of us has a moral obligation to stand up, speak and speak out. When you see something that is not right, you must say something. You must do something. Democracy is not a state. It is an act, and each generation must do its part to help build what we call the beloved community. a nation and world, society at peace with itself. Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. Voting and participation in the democratic processes are key. The vote is the most powerful nonviolent change agent you have in a democratic society. You must use it because it is not guaranteed. You can lose it. You must also study and learn the lessons of history because humanity has been involved in this soul-wrenching and existential struggle for a very long time. People on every continent have stood in your shoes through decades and centuries before you. The truth does not change, and that is why the answers worked out long ago can help you find solutions to the challenges of our time. Continue to build union between movements, stretching across the globe, because we must put away our willingness to profit from the exploitation of others. Though I may not be here with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. In my life, I have done all I can to demonstrate that way of peace. The way of love and nonviolence is the more excellent way. Now it is your turn to let freedom rule. When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of fate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide. John Lewis. So we're going to go ahead and play the video now, and we'll be back with the moderated conversation at roughly 4:15, and we'd like you to join us then if you're going to be watching outside of this. So Josh, please go ahead and start. Thank you.
John Lewis has crossed over the final bridge. The last of the big six civil rights leaders is gone. If courage had a name, it was his. And he leaves us at a time when the stakes of all for which he struggled couldn't be higher. For John Lewis, voting was sacramental, and he shed his blood for us to exercise this most fundamental of rights. Forevermore, generations, starting with this one, will honor him by casting their ballots, a secular communion meant to strengthen our democracy. His roar as the conscience of the Congress will echo down through history. Few who ever lived have done more to inspire change. His truth goes marching on.
I just happen to believe that in every personality, there's something good, there's something decent, there's something sacred. And we don't have a right to go around damaging another personality. So I believe in nonviolence as a way of life, as a way of living.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. assassinated Memphis, Tennessee, April 4th, 1968.
Tell the story.
The Supreme Court
Tell the story. And tell it over and over again.
We must free ourselves, the way of violence, the way of division. We can lay down this heavy burden. Hate is too heavy a burden to bear.
With most people, they just don't see John Lewis giving a speech. They feel John Lewis in terms of what he's done and the impact on this country. So therefore they listen.
Here is somebody who walked into fire hoses and cattle prods and beatings and remained absolutely nonviolent.
And what John Lewis did, most Americans could never do, to be beaten and not fight back.
It is a rare honor in this life to follow one of your heroes. And John Lewis is one of my heroes.
His experience is seared into our collective memory.
People died for the right to vote. Friends of mine, colleagues of mine.
John put his force of his soul against the system.
Enough is enough. We must bring this war to an end.
And he has not, he's not wavered. was something deep down within me, moving me, that I could no longer be satisfied or go along with an evil system.
I would ask my mother, I would ask my father, my grandparents, why? Why this? Why that? They said, don't get in trouble. Don't get in the way.
The congressman and I have this running joke about how I think he's a nicer person in Atlanta than he is in Washington.
I'm going back to Atlanta. All right, thank you.
He is more fun-loving and going all the time.
If we can work it out, it'll be good to go there, try to save those 2 seats.
In Seattle, you go to Las Vegas.
This Thursday?
No, Thursday the 21st.
Right. No, don't jump, please, don't jump. You don't have any insurance. There's a lot of hot dogs. Eat your hot dogs.
The people in this district, they call me their son, their baby.
All right, nice seeing you there.
Good to see you now. Take it easy.
Yeah, you know how to do the blackberry, don't you?
Yeah, I know how to do blackberry.
And they walk up and they say, I'm so proud of you.
I mean, I feel like I walked with Dr. King just as I stand next to you.
Thank you.
And it makes you feel good, really. So that's why it's important to come home to that reservoir. You come back to get a little strength.
I come from southeast Alabama. I grew up on a farm. My father was a sharecropper. But that was life growing up in rural Alabama in the 50s. Growing up there, I saw those signs that said white men. I saw those signs that said colored men. When I was in school, I was bused long distances over unpaved roads, dusty in summer and muddy in winter, to attend overcrowded, poorly staffed, segregated schools. The evil system of segregation had been built on a foundation of racism, greed, hatred, and the denial of human needs. It was a closed society, and everywhere I turned. Hello, how you doing? How you doing? Good to see you. You haven't changed one bit.
Neither of you. Maybe you may have put on a pound or two.
He always wanted to be a preacher, and he would carry his Bible and all around with him, and we'd have him preaching, and of course, he was sincere, but we were not, you know. We would just laugh.
Now I'm gonna tell the chicken story today. I fell in love with raising chickens. And I raised those chickens like no one else could raise chickens. So I grew up with the idea of becoming a preacher. I was gonna be a minister. I used to raise chickens. I used to preach to the chickens.
He did. It was great.
One occasion I tried to baptize a chicken, tried to save the soul of a chicken. So what do you feed these chickens?
We feed them corn, cracked corn.
And on occasion, a chicken would get sick, and the chicken would die.
We buried it.
We buried them. We had a chicken cemetery, and delivered a eulogy at the funeral.
And he would preach so until he would make us feel like we were at an actual funeral. We'd be crying at them chicken funeral. He was something else.
This is my uncle, James Carter. This is my mother's brother. And this is a cousin, James Boswell.
I had 6 brothers and 3 sisters. Had many, many first cousins that lived nearby.
And this is Sam. This is take your hat off, Sam. So you see, this is John's image.
Sometimes he called me him and called him me.
Many of the values that I acquired came from my mother and from my father. They believed that you should treat people fair and you should be kind to everybody.
It's a good season of the year to have a good meal together and everybody eat all of this food. All of that was field. We grew cotton, and on the terrace we had tomatoes and peas. It'd be so hot out there sometime in the hot sun, and I would just pray for it to rain or the cloud to come over.
He didn't want to work.
It's not that I didn't want to work. It was I didn't like the whole idea of working in the field. I used to argue with my father and with my mother, saying it was just gambling, really, that there was slavery. It was taking chance. They go and they borrow here and borrow there, and then at the end of the year, they didn't make anything. It was the order of the day. And most people sort of accepted it. They didn't want to rock the boat.
We, the disinherited of this land, we who have been oppressed so long, are tired of going through the long night of captivity.
In 1955, I heard Martin Luther King Jr. speaking on radio. And I felt like he was speaking directly to me, saying, John Lewis, John Robert Lewis, you too can do something.
And we, the Negro citizens of Montgomery, Alabama, do now and will continue to carry on our mass protest.
The bus boycott was not a confrontation with segregation. It was a withdrawal of support from segregation.
And back during that time, blacks had to sit in the rear of the bus and was not able to ride the front seat of the bus.
They would put their money in the slot up front and would have to walk to the back of the bus to board at the back door. And often before they could get back there, the driver would pull off. So when Rosa decided she was not going to give up her seat, that set off the boycott. Nobody rode the buses. 50,000 people stood together. We walked in the rain, the snow, and it snowed in Montgomery, the sleet, and the heat for 381 days.
Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., the Montgomery bus boycott had a profound impact on me. It gave me a way out. It inspired me to find a way to get in the way.
John Lewis lit up because that's what he'd been waiting to hear. Somebody to make a direct reference to the problems of his life.
And when I left and took that Greyhound bus to Nashville, Tennessee as a student, my mother said, be particular.
I would tell him just like I tell him now. I would tell him to be particular wherever he go and whatever he do.
She was saying, be watchful, be mindful, be careful. Don't get into trouble. But I got in trouble. Good trouble, necessary trouble. To go to Nashville to school, it was a different world. It was a new world. To be in an integrated setting, a desegregated setting for the first time in my life, really, it was a different world.
We were in seminary, and I first knew John there. John came to seminary, and John was not able to talk well, and you expected that from ministry. Yet there was something deeper than that about John. It was not in the finish, it was not in the vocabulary per se. It was in fact, the force of the personality that you were listening to.
Segregation, you just couldn't go into a large department store and take a seat at a lunch counter. You couldn't try on clothing.
You didn't like the conditions, but you did what was required.
And we felt it was a affront to our own dignity, to our own worth. Every Tuesday night, I started attending these nonviolent workshops, and it was there that I met Jim Lawson.
We saw a wrong, and with our bodies, we went into the situation to correct it.
And he kept saying what we could do as students, as young people. He told us all about what Gandhi attempted to do in South Africa.
We were trained in nonviolent direct action, focused on the lunch counters. And that's what our training was about.
The role plan was conditioning us, preparing us, because we were going to face opposition, possibility of us being beaten. We had to be prepared. The first morning that we went downtown to participate in sit-ins, I was assigned to go to Woolworth, and we would go in and take our seats, orderly, peaceful, reading a book, writing a paper, all day. And then we would come back the next day, waiting to be served.
The white people in Nashville were stunned. I mean, they were more than stunned. Their way of life, they felt, was being disregarded.
There was something deep down within me, moving me, that I could no longer be satisfied or go along with an evil system, that I had to be maladjusted to it. And in spite of all of this, I had to keep loving the people who denied me service.
We knew that we were sticking our necks out to realize that you could get blind or your teeth could get knocked out.
We had to make the point that sometimes you have to put yourself in harm's way. And in the process, you may stir up some violence, but you would not engage in the violence. We were attacked. People were beaten, lighted cigarettes put out down people's back, poured ketchup and hot sauce on people. The police officials came in and arrested all of us. Holding my head high, I felt so free. I felt liberated. I felt like I crossed over.
And this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.
My mother felt that it would bring shame and disgrace on the family name for someone to be arrested.
Let it shine, let it shine.
I would never forget the letter she wrote saying you need to get out of that mess. And that's when I wrote her back and told her that I was doing what I thought was right.
Over my head, oh Lord, I see freedom in the air.
Yes, my mother, my father told me over and over again. When I asked them about those signs that said white men, colored men, they said, that's the way it is. You are the leaders of the 21st century. You must lead. You must be a headlight and not a tail light. You must find a way to get in the way.
Well, I do remember my graduation from college years ago when I was supposed to be graduating in 1961. I had my robe, had my cap, but I missed the graduation. I was in jail in Mississippi during the Freedom Ride. For many years, I had traveled from Troy to Nashville, and I had seen and felt the sting of segregation in the waiting room, going to the back of the bus. In the fall of 1960, the United States Supreme Court had issued a decision banning discrimination in public transportation, but it was not being enforced.
No Southern states were abiding by the Supreme Court ruling. They were ordered to cease and desist, but no one was doing that.
And so when the idea of the Freedom Rides came along, that was my moment. That was my moment. We had been warned that it was a dangerous mission, and we had to be prepared to go to jail, be beaten, or to die.
Strategy was always blacks and whites would sit together toward the front of the bus. The intended route was to go from Washington, D.C. to New Orleans. And of course, we didn't get that far.
The bus in Anniston was certified. I also found out the bus that went into Birmingham, the riders was beaten, and a lot of them was in bad shape. And we was told that the Freedom Ride had stopped.
But because of the violence, I made a decision with some of the local citizens that we should find a way to pick up the ride and continue.
Everybody told us that it was too dangerous. We should not take up the Freedom Ride.
We felt we could not allow the threat of violence stop a nonviolent campaign. We left the Greyhound bus station in Birmingham.
We will make sure that people traveling in interstate commerce, traveling across our highways.
We have been assured by Robert Kennedy and the Department of Justice and the officials of the state of Alabama that protection will be provided.
I could see 4 policemen motorcycles in front of the bus. A helicopter was flying on top of the bus. Had state troopers behind the bus, and every 4 or 5 miles down the highway.
But when we got about 15 or 20 miles outside of Montgomery, all sign of the patrol car disappeared.
And we pulled into the bus station. I remember John saying, Bill, it's a little too quiet.
It was so eerie, almost like time was standing still. We started off the bus, and the moment we got on the ground, a mob came out of nowhere.
And went straight towards the media. And they started swinging on the reporters and knocking people down and taking their cameras and smashing them and
Hundreds and hundreds of people.
Acting just wow. And so we knew we were going to be next.
And I said to this group that we shouldn't run, we should stand still.
So that's what we did. We all joined hands and waited for the mob to come. And they did.
People from everywhere, axe handles, sticks, pitchforks, and everything else, beating us to death.
I was beaten. I was hit in the head with a wooden crate. I think I was knocked unconscious. My seatmate, Jim Sford, was so severely beaten, his teeth was knocked out.
I mean, they were just vicious.
It was probably 15 or 20 minutes before any policeman showed up.
We was trying really to appeal to the people that were beating us, appeal to the people that didn't protect us. Nonviolence is love in action. In saving the other person, in rescuing or redeeming the other person, you're rescuing, you're saving yourself.
It was almost 50 years ago when Elwyn Wilson and his friends attacked a black man at a bus station in South Carolina. That young black man went on to become a congressman, Congressman John Lewis.
I'd already tried and did change my life.
He says he was a racist for years. He took part in multiple beatings. He joined the KKK. He says it was
very moving and very touching for me for him to come to Washington and say, I'm sorry for what I did. And I said, I forgive you. And I don't have any bitterness or hatred. It's a great feeling. It says something about the distance we've come. That's what the movement was all about, to create a different society, a better society, to be reconciled to each other.
It is impossible to imagine a successful civil rights movement that did not have that student wing.
You're talking about basically young people from the age of 15 to probably about 24 years of age. We're young, idealistic. We had a vision of a better America.
We affirmed the philosophical or religious ideal of nonviolence.
Through nonviolence, courage displaces fear. Love transforms hate.
Acceptance dissipates prejudice. Peace dominates war.
Faith reconciles doubt. Hope ends despair.
John became the chairman of SNCC in very large part out of sheer courage.
There were those who were much more articulate, but the vote was taken based on John's clear reputation of being courageous and also taking action. And it was an action-oriented group.
We were the guerrillas of the movement. And we deliberately would put ourselves in harm's way to try to encourage black people to stand up.
Next week, I shall ask the Congress of the United States to act, to make a commitment it has not fully made in this century to the proposition that race has no place in American life or law.
I came here 23 years old, the chair of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, to participate in a march for freedom, a march for jobs, a march for equality. Well, I was very thrilled and moved by being asked to be one of the speakers at the March on Washington.
I think about a week before the march, John came into the march office with his speech in his hand and showed it to people, and we all loved it. It was militant. It wasn't compromising.
I had a great deal of admiration for the older leaders of the march, but in a sense, I felt like I was on equal footing. I came fresh from the struggle, fresh from the front line of the battle. I was not in New York in a big office.
Word got back to us that there were some problems with, not the whole speech, but frankly with a very small portion of the speech. And our first response was defensiveness.
And this was a very radical political speech. They didn't want the adults to have anything to say about it.
The word around Washington, and the thing that most people feared would be that the march would cause violence. People were very concerned about how this march would look, how it would affect the Congress.
I think there were powerful forces within the administration putting pressure on some of the movement leaders. We felt that what President Kennedy had proposed in his bill was a little too late. It was 250,000 people out there, and we were making these changes, taking out a word here, changing a word there, and I was steaming a little inside.
Our major concern, as I recall it, was that we do whatever changes had to be done and that they meet our standards so that we would not feel that we had sold out.
I have the pleasure to present to this great audience
Mr. Randolph, he was the dean of black leadership. He said, "John, let's change this for the sake of unity. We come this far together, let's stay together."
John agreed with A. Philip Randolph, just out of respect for who he was.
In some sense, we recognized that the whole point of the march was to draw people together.
So we had to make that compromise, and we did it. But that always left a question in the back of our minds about compromises.
And I will never forget that moment when A. Philip Randolph said, "I now present to you the National Chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee."
Brother John Lewis.
And I took a deep breath, and I said, we march today for jobs and freedom.
The time will come when we will not confine our marching to Washington. We will march through the South, through the streets of Jackson, through the streets of Danville, through the streets of Cambridge, through the streets of Birmingham. We do not want our freedom gradually, but we want to be free now.
5 decades ago today,
Americans came to this honored place. They came by the thousands. Willingly, they went to jail to protest unjust laws. That was the spirit young people like John Lewis brought to that day.
We are a revolution. We are tired. We are tired of being beaten by policemen. We're tired of seeing our people locked up in jail over and over again. And then you holler, be patient. How long can we be patient?
50 years later, we cannot wait. We cannot be patient. We must stand up and fight the good fight as we march today.
Members of my own organization, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, came here to organize voter registration drives.
Do you have any business in the courthouse?
And we had the resistance of a sheriff who would not allow people to even enter the courthouse door to take the literacy test. They couldn't register to vote. On one occasion, a man was asked to count the number of bubbles on a bar of soap. On another occasion, a man was asked to count the number of jelly beans in a jar. They were told they couldn't read or write well enough.
The day marks the beginning.
During this Selma campaign, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. came to Selma.
The communities invited us, so we agreed that we would come to work with the community. SNCC saw this as us coming in to invade their territory. But John never got upset about that. John was with us.
After a series of arrests and jailing and beating on the part of the elected officials, the sheriffs and other law enforcement people in Selma, a young black man by the name of Jimmy Lee Jackson, and he was shot in the stomach by a state trooper. And a few days later, he died. And we said then that we had to march from Selma to Montgomery.
There will be no march between Selma, Alabama, and Montgomery, and I have so instructed the Department of Public Safety.
The local people in Selma wanted to march, but the National SNCC office were opposed to the idea of people walking from Selma to Montgomery. I disagreed.
John was just morally committed. He made a personal commitment to Selma.
There was a feeling that Dr. King and the SCLC people would be there for a while. A lot of people would get hurt. Then they would leave and go someplace else.
SNCC had taken a position that it was not going to be a part of the Selma demonstrations.
They finally concluded that if I wanted to march, I can march as an individual, but not as chair of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
He did not argue with them. He let them take their position. He was a person of convictions, personal convictions. So he took a stand and did what he thought was right.
That day, that Sunday, was the first Sunday. My husband and Martin were going that Monday. And the call came to Ebenezer to speak to Dr. King about marching. Because when they got there, John and those, the people were ready to march.
And so it was my responsibility to walk with Jose, and they asked me to lead it on behalf of SNCC. They didn't know that I had been told not to represent the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. To me, it was a very prayerful, orderly, peaceful, silent protest. It reminded me of Gandhi's March to the Sea.
So they marched, and oh my God.
When we got to the apex of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, crossing the Alabama River, looking down, you saw a sea of blue. It was Alabama State Troopers, the sheriff and his posse on horseback. It was a very eerie feeling the moment that we stood there. You can see the breeze, you can see the wind just blowing someone's coat.
Saying that this is an unlawful assembly, you are ordered to disperse, go home, or go to your church. This march will not continue.
We stood there. I looked at Jose. Jose looked at me. Said, let's kneel and pray. Before we could pass the word back to the group to kneel and pray, the major said, "Troopers, advance." I was hit in the head by a state trooper with a nightstick. My legs went from under me. I thought I saw death. I didn't ask to be beaten on the bridge. I don't like pain. I don't like to suffer in a hospital. But if that's the price you have to pay to make things better for others, I was willing to pay that price. That happened on a Sunday. By that Tuesday, there was demonstration in 80 major cities in America.
Now, John, you were down there coming this way?
Right, we were walking right over there in twos, orderly. No one said on the sidewalk. No one said a word.
The horses came this way?
They came.
Those are the things where he gets very, very serious. You can tell he's, at least in my words, saying, I survived that.
8 days after Bloody Sunday, when Lyndon Johnson spoke to the nation, spoke to a joint session of the Congress. He condemned the violence in Selma, introduced the Voting Rights Act. Before he concluded that speech, he said, and we shall
overcome.
Sitting next to Dr. King with Andy, C.T. Vivian, and others, I look at Dr. King. Tears started flowing from his eyes. We all cried alone. And Dr. King said the Voting Rights Act would be passed.
John's commitment to Selma was directly linked to John's personal commitment to Selma as opposed to a political decision. Now the question is, could he make that personal commitment and still be the spokesperson of SNCC?
In the country at that time, there was a great movement toward Black consciousness, Black nationalism.
Today it's time to stop singing and start swinging. We got a new generation of Black people in this country.
You also have the Watts and Harlem rebellions, and now people are beginning to look at the concerns of Blacks who are caught in the ghettos.
There have been two nonviolent.
I was a move in SNCC at that time to move all of the white people out. It was a movement toward giving up on the philosophy of nonviolence. There were some people who wanted me to take on Dr. King. I was not anyway going to get in a fight with Martin Luther King Jr.
I think that Stokely was probably kind of waiting in the wings for his opportunity to become chairman of the organization.
People felt that I was not militant enough, not radical enough. It was time for me, in a sense, to leave. But that was a very difficult moment because SNCC had been my family. These young people have been my brothers and sisters. It was one of the most difficult periods for me in the movement. It was like breaking up. It was like being put out.
Oh yes, I prayed a prayer, and I prayed out loud that night. I said, Lord, I'm down here trying to do what's right.
John Lewis never, ever doubted, questioned, or disrespected anything that Martin Luther King said. Martin felt that John Lewis was his true spiritual son. He really loved him like his own child. The rest of us, Martin was pretty aloof. But with John, he was really comfortable with John because John wanted to listen. John wanted to hang on his every word.
He was like a big brother. He was my friend. He would ask me sometimes jokingly, John, do you preach sometime? And I said, yes, Dr. King, when I'm taking a shower. And he would just laugh. He would laugh. He thought it was so funny. I got involved in the presidential campaign of Robert Kennedy in '68.
We can work together in the last analysis, and that what has been going on within the United States.
Well, I saw what role that individual politician could play in bringing people together. And more than anything else, I think after the assassination of Dr. King and Robert Kennedy, I felt like maybe I could be part of an effort to pick up where they had left off.
Young people.
As past chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Lewis was arrested and beaten during the 1960s. Today, as director of the Atlanta-based Voter Education Project, Lewis is still trying to register blacks to vote.
People are afraid to go to the county courthouse. They're afraid to talk to voter registration workers. They're afraid that they may lose their jobs.
Friends of mine started saying to me, you should run for something, you should run for something. And the time came.
John Lewis and Julian Bond, two bona fide heroes of the black struggle for civil rights.
The power brokers in Atlanta, in the kind of back room, smoky room, decided Julian Bond should run for Congress.
At stake was much more than just which man will be the Democratic candidate for Congress from Georgia's 5th District.
Lewis and Bond met during the days of the lunch counter sit-ins in Nashville.
We had great times together. We laughed together, we played together.
I'm not going to let a 6-month political campaign disrupt a friendship I've had with John Lewis for almost 30 years.
Julian Bond is very good looking and very well spoken. John kept saying, do you want a showboat or a tugboat?
The runoff has been nasty. There were no serious issue differences between the two until Lewis made one. He took a drug test and challenged Bond to do the same.
My test came out clean.
Bond called the drug test a cheap political trick.
So quickly I responded and said, Mr. Bond, my friend, we were asked to take a drug test. I took my test, and here's the results.
Some people seem to have thought that that was vicious.
Julian reluctantly took the test, and it didn't come out good news for him. That was really demise of Julian and a real strain in their relationship.
That probably was a low blow. Probably if I had to do that over again, I probably wouldn't do it.
You did it well. It was a surprising come-from-behind victory for John Lewis in his bitter Democratic congressional primary runoff with longtime friend and civil rights ally Julian Bond.
There was that fear that he was naive,
the feeling that if you believe strongly in righteousness and justice, you're naive. That was my personal fear, that John's integrity would be a negative for him in Congress.
John and I both are housed in the Cannon building, and I was running late for votes. And once I got on the elevator had to stop at, I think, the 3rd floor. I'm like, okay, who could this be? I'm gonna be late for votes, and it's John. I said, hey, John. He was like, can I catch a ride? I said, let's do it. And so we got off on the 2nd floor, and we walked outside.
We were considering the health care bill, and it was to come up for a vote. And the day before we had a caucus on that bill, John Lewis and others had been walking.
Hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of people had come to Washington for the purpose of being disruptive.
John Lewis, Andre Carson, Emanuel Cleaver, and others, Barney Frank, on their way over through crowds that were jeering and hurling ethnic, vulgar slurs.
This may be the most important vote that we cast as members of this body. We have a moral obligation today to make health care a right and not a privilege.
Emanuel Cleaver was together with John Lewis. They were walking over to the Capitol when somebody spit on Congressman Cleaver and yelled the N-word at Congressman Lewis.
I watched John Lewis so that I could choreograph my actions in a manner consistent with him, because I knew that John Lewis handled it the way civil rights activists were supposed to handle it.
By the time of Sunday's caucus, people were very edgy about this.
But I have to tell you, when you look behind the scenes, this is white knuckle time. They do not have the votes yet.
I asked John if he would speak at our caucus, and he did, and he said, what transpired yesterday is not important. The important thing for us is to keep our eye on the prize.
When we were in the room and we were about to leave, I wanted to walk across the street with my colleagues. The whole caucus was walking together.
And the security for the leadership, especially for Nancy Pelosi, saying, you cannot do that, you cannot walk. There's an angry crowd there, you cannot.
And John, who had been really insulted by these people in the course of this debate, we just locked arms and walked across the street.
A remarkable scene, a remarkable statement. The Speaker and Democratic leader walking hand in hand to go vote today with Representative John Lewis.
The culmination of the epic 14-month fight over health care came late in the night.
We walked into the Capitol with pride and dignity, and we passed that bill. It was the right thing to do.
I mean, when John Lewis said, this is my fight, and I feel the same fight from the 60s, who else can put that kind of imprimatur on a movement and say it's a civil rights movement? If one of the leaders, icons of the civil rights movement, an African-American man from the South, says it is, then guess what? It is.
D.C. police arrested Democratic members of Congress at an immigration rally on the National Mall Tuesday. This arrest was the 45th for the longtime representative from Georgia.
notice out anything like that.
Having him speak on behalf of gay and lesbian and transgender issues raises our voice to a degree which we could not reach without him.
Eric got Congressman Lewis to sign this for me as a birthday present, and I was just really taken aback by it.
Believe me, he stepped out when others wouldn't. And so he's been consistent on every issue that's come before the Congress.
He was there when hate crimes legislation passed. Also been there for people living with HIV and AIDS.
It doesn't matter whether we're straight or gay. I will not be satisfied, I will not be pleased until we end discrimination based on sexual orientation.
Congressman Lewis makes the connection that civil rights is about equal rights for everyone. That was Dr. King's plea, that a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
You go the way I go to your office, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The vote is precious. It is almost sacred. It is the most powerful nonviolent tool that we have in a democracy.
I'm John Lewis. I'm a member of Congress. I work in Washington with President Obama.
You want to give me some of your hair? Huh? God bless you. Thank you, dear.
It really makes a difference to me that he started when he was my age, because a lot of the times I feel like I can't make a difference because I'm only 16.
Election day is a great day. For him, just historically, the power to vote and to cast that vote is just so sacred.
Good morning. How you doing?
It's just a wonderful feeling to be able to go and cast a vote, and so many people that I knew never had a chance, never had an opportunity.
Really important. He continues to tell the people of America that things haven't always been the way they are now, and unless we keep our guard up, things could always be bad again.
On the air right now because the Supreme Court has just made a major decision about the voting rights.
Struck down a key section of the 1965 Voting Rights Act.
One of the most successful civil rights laws ever passed.
Took the teeth out of a law enacted nearly 50 years ago.
Roberts bluntly declared that times have changed and the law must too.
I must tell you, I was disappointed because I think what the court did today is stab the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and it's very hard.
Texas responded immediately, saying it would start enforcing one of the nation's...
needs to have a photo ID and a potential
move to toughen its laws, including a reduction in early voting hours.
Only hours after the decision was announced by the Supreme Court, states began to put into force efforts to suppress people's voting rights. It is a duty and the responsibility of Congress to restore the life and soul of the Voting Rights Act. And we must do it, and we must do it now. We're calling on the leadership to bring gun control legislation to the House floor. Give us a vote. Let us vote. We came here to do our job. We came here to work. We have to occupy the floor of the House until there's action.
Scores of Democrats flooded the House floor, chanting, "No break, no bill."
We lost too many of our children, our babies, too many of our mothers and fathers to gun violence. We're not giving up the fight. The fight is an ongoing fight. I cannot explain it. It's impossible for me to say why and how I got involved in a cause and a movement. I happen to believe that maybe there's something in the universe, or maybe in the environment, or maybe in the spirit of history. And you have to sort of allow yourself to be used. We must never, ever become bitter or hostile. We shouldn't take anything personal. This is politics. This is a business. This is the job that some of us ask for. Sometimes we get bruised, sometimes we get knocked down, but we have the will, the courage, the ability, and the capacity to get up, to find a way to get in the way, to get people to see what is happening. That will only come by people building and working together. We're talking about building a lasting peace, a community at peace with itself.
You know, John Lewis was a historic figure. I think most of you have heard his story, and it's a very dynamic story. And we've got three panelists here who can talk in detail about what his legacy meant for them, what it means for us. I think it's going to be a robust conversation. We look forward to hearing your thoughts and questions on John Lewis. I'm Stan Simpson. Our panelists include William Dyson, Mr. Dyson, a former representative with the Connecticut State House of Representatives from 1976 to 2008. He was the former co-chair of the most powerful committee there, the Appropriations Committee. So he was one of the most powerful men in the state when he was during his tenure. He was in the southern states during the sit-ins and the Freedom Riders, so he understands this movement firsthand. He's also a political science professor here at CCSU and on the advisory board, chair of the Racial Profiling Prohibition Project. We're also joined by Victoria Christgau, who's the founder and executive director for the Connecticut Center for Nonviolence. You saw how nonviolence was a great platform and a great part of the theme, Mr. Lewis. She'll talk about that. A lifelong peace and nonviolent educator. She's worked alongside renowned civil rights leader and strategist and freedom writer, Dr. Bernard Lafayette. We also are joined by Deacon Art Miller, a local and national civil rights activist, former director for the Office of the Black Catholic Ministries. His family knew Emmett Till's family back in 1955 in Chicago. So we're going to start things off right away with John Lewis was about finding good trouble. So Mr. Dyson, we'll start with you, but we'll continue on. Since Deacon Miller, I'll see you there first. Yes. Mr. Dyson, when you get in there, I'll start with you. What good trouble? I know you're a renowned troublemaker. What good trouble do you find yourself in these days?
Thank you for the honor of being here. And as we all know, the end of the story of John Lewis, we know, because today it came to its fruition. But getting in good trouble means that we are confronting evil. And the only way to confront what is evil is by being good. So the opposite of evil is good, and that's good trouble. Anytime one has the courage, the grace, the strength, the wherewithal, and the commitment to confront evil, as John Lewis did, as taught by Dr. King and those who went before him, understand, embrace, and love getting in a little good trouble.
I've watched your Facebook page, Deacon Miller, and I've seen you interact with KKK members, using your spiritual bearing to try to find some common ground with Klansmen. Can you talk briefly about that? That's trouble. That sounds like trouble to me.
Well, the fourth principle that Dr. King talked about was that nonviolence holds that suffering can educate and transform. And if, in fact, we adhere to what John Lewis did, we can find what is common amongst us. So you can confront a KKK person, and here's one truth that we both agree on. We both want America to be a better country.
And have that conversation.
And that's it. If we can then begin there, it is how do we get there becomes the difficulty and the problem. So I can speak with anyone because we first must find what we can embrace and agree upon and then build from there. And that's the foundation, I believe, of SNCC, CORE, and the NAACP, not only with Dr. King's teachings, but the teaching of Gandhi and all of those who embraced peace.
Right. But Victoria Christgau, you worked with Deacon Miller on a lot of nonviolent issues. what kind of good trouble you getting yourself into these days?
Okay, thank you. And thank you. I'm delighted to be here. And it is such an honorable day, an incredibly significant time. And what I want to say as we begin, in my thinking, is that it is essential that America takes this time and puts this pause out and really stops and pays attention so that we can continue to disrupt some of the inconsistencies in our country, the promises, the symbolism, the ideas that things are comfortable where they certainly are not. And that's becoming very, very evident to, I'd want to say white America, where perhaps they weren't so aware before. In terms of good trouble, we're here at the Connecticut Center for Nonviolence. Deacon Art Miller is a board member, and he's been one of our assistants and supporters for a long time. We do a lot of work together, it's true. We're working with young people. We have 24 high school students going through Kingian nonviolence training right now this summer on Zoom, which is not an easy task, but we're completely committed to do that. We're partnered with schools. We have 3 or 4 CREC schools that we're working in and engaged in on a daily basis, including through the summers. Young people. We can't get anywhere ahead if we don't have young people coming back up in John Lewis's shoes, and C.T. Vivian, by the way, as well, and in Dr. Bernard Lafayette's shoes. Good trouble. We are holding constant conversations in the white community as well in an attempt to continue to raise the understanding of why these laws that have been put into place and why the structures that have been put in place have been so damaging to Black and brown people of color in this country. So we're very active in attempting to raise the level of awareness and also ignite people to follow in John Lewis's shoes.
Art Miller, your family grew up with Emmett Till back in the day.
Yes.
And I was struck when John Lewis says Emmett Till was his George Floyd. He was 15 years old, John Lewis, and he saw this 14-year-old boy who was from Chicago and basically was brutalized and lynched in Mississippi for allegedly disrespecting a white woman. Your family knew the Till family and grew up in that era. Bring us to that world, what it was like back then.
Well, we certainly were, quite frankly, that was the moment that it seems that this country lost its innocence and had to confront the horror of what it truly was. Things could no longer be swept under the rug. The truth was imminent, and it had to be addressed. It was a difficult time, but it was. I was only 10 at the time.
And the truth was, he was savagely beaten. He was hung, thrown into a river, and as part of that, Jet magazine decided to run his picture at the family's wishes. The mother wanted the world to see what savagery and white racism looked like, and they ran that picture, which created an international storm. Sorry about that.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we've come to recognize, and the maturity of our movement that as it came through the years, is that we've come to recognize today, Brother Stan, is that Emmett Till was not murdered because of the color of his skin. And we've come to understand that he was murdered because that community was filled with hatred. He was just a little boy.
Right.
It was not his fault, it was theirs. And I'm convinced there had to be 2 or 3 good people in Little Money, Mississippi, but they did not have a voice by which they could confront the evil that was there. Today, we're beginning to confront that evil. George Floyd was not killed because of the color of his skin. George Floyd was killed because that officer had been given the right, the ugly right, and the authority by the community to kill him. And he thought what he was doing was the behest of the community. And what we have to do, if we're going to have any change, is to begin to change the community. We often say that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, our village is sick. And if we don't heal and cure the community, we will continue to pull out broken children like that officer who killed George Floyd.
One thing that you see happening around the country, around the world, and again, Bill Dyson, if you happen to come in and just give me a side of you're in, we see happening around the world, we see what we call the Great Reckoning, that people beginning to understand the context of history, how it's been whitewashed, so to speak. And I want to talk about the whole nonviolence movement. Before you begin to change people, you've got to change their belief system. And so many folks have a different belief system based on the history as they know it. Victoria, can you talk about that? You're on the forefront here of the nonviolent movement. How much does history have in helping you to change minds and educating people on the legacy of slavery and how the remnants are still very much in society today? A lot of folks don't believe that's the case and need to be educated on that.
Endless education, endless education. You're absolutely right. Part of the work of nonviolence teachings and the steps for nonviolence, step number 2 is education. We have to educate ourselves and others. So if individuals don't see the relevance of how slavery has tainted and completely led us to this point in time, it is absolutely relevant to take the steps and do that education. But as you know, Stan, whose education have we been listening to? What is the education that's being put into schools? So this opportunity that we're at, where we're faced with right now, is that whole re-education. I mean, simply the way that certain monuments were considered completely, stoic and images of what our America represents. But look at the internal violence too. So you see, our world is really addicted to violence. We're addicted to violence in every form of entertainment, in all forms of communication. And so if you happen to be walking by one of those monuments, or that case in the Yale study where the man broke the glass of that slave owner, in Yale, if you're walking by that, what kind of internal violence does that produce inside of yourself? Okay, so now we take the monuments down, but it must be replaced with education. It must be replaced with a continual understanding of what kind of violence that's perpetrating inside the souls of individuals whose legacy is not that, but whose legacy was slavery.
And what I find an interesting irony is that people who get offended by violence today and looting have no context and no history that violence and looting has been a part of the American fiber since the country started, right? You go back to Black Wall Street in Tulsa and the race riots that pillaged a Black community, and you saw how John Lewis was beaten and roughed up, trying to do something peaceful. So there's sort of a short-term memory. They see things happening now that are violent and say, wow, those folks are very violent. How dare they, and not understand the context that violence was very much a part of this country's history.
But you take people away from their homeland completely. You take people away. What is that not violence? Right there, number one, the bedrock, the very thing in which we've created supposed change was built on violence. Every bit of that is violent. And in Kingian nonviolence, we say violence is not just physical, it's emotional, mental, spiritual harm. And what kind of harm are we doing to one another? And we see that extremely exacerbated right now. And so, yeah, looting, and what? So many of those looters are not even the individuals that are there protesting peacefully in the first place. They're part of the problem. They're not in any way part of the solution. And yet, if you are looting out of absolute agony, why? Because you've not been listened to. Why? Because your conditions have never changed. Why? Because they're symbolic messaging only. How much paint can we put on walkways? I think it's brilliant. I'm glad to see it. But if we don't back it up, what's going to happen in this country? We've got to really work at education and beyond that. I'm sure my panelists would talk at length about that.
Yeah, and when you think about John Lewis's journey, Emmett Till, 1955. Yeah. For Mr. Lewis, was a 65-year journey battling oppression, white supremacy, bigotry. Think about it, 80 years old, for him to see the world sort of moving in this direction, it had to be a bit uplifting to him that in his dying days, he was finally seeing the world begin to embrace what he'd been working on for so long. I had both Deacon and Victoria to talk about that. Again, Mr. Dyson, if you're there, feel free to pipe in. But Deacon, will go to you on that. With the irony where John Lewis died at 80, seeing the whole world just on fire with change,
Yes.
Must have been heartening for him.
You know what's really remarkable is that it's estimated that only 5% of the American population participated in any meaningful way during the civil rights movement as dictated from 55 to 65. 5% of the American population. And I just heard the other day it's closer to about 25% today that have participated in a meaningful way, meaning going to a march or something like that in our country as of now. What a profound difference that has occurred in just this period of time. I was arrested in 2015 for Black Lives Matter, and all I heard were the same things I heard when I was arrested in 1963. You're a bunch of communist Marxists, go back to Africa, and this was 2015. When I came back to my church in Simsbury, I was met with a lot of the pushback. Why are you doing that? What's the point of that? That doesn't make sense. Don't all lives matter? Then in 2020, I went back to Simsbury because I was asked to speak. And there in that little town of Simsbury, there were hundreds of white folks, kids particularly, who are participating in Black Lives Matter. That is a profound paradigm change just in those 5 years. And I think it was brought about the circumstance we find ourselves in this political acrimony, the coronavirus that's occurring, and this whole idea of this violence that has occurred, and people have had to come out from their shells to confront the truth of what's happening in our country. And if we can't do it now, then it can't be done. And I do believe, because this is the first time that I've seen such waves of young folks embracing this. And when I do get a chance to talk to them, they say, well, Deacon, we're walking and standing on your shoulders. And my response is, get the heck off my shoulders. Because if you stay on my shoulders, the only place you're going is where I've been. There's a whole lot more to go. So get to stepping.
Victoria and Bill Dyson, I'll keep checking in with you, Mr. Dyson. If you're in, just feel free to say Stan, and I'll know you're there. I can see your name there. So once you're on, give me some text so that when I will get you involved. Victoria, you're on the non-violent movement. That's your forte. Mm-hmm. But the reality with the George Floyd case, I mean, unfortunately, we saw the murder of this man by the police knee on his neck, and you didn't see any you saw violent or non-violent protests. You didn't really see action until that police station was burned to the ground, and then you saw the cops arrested. So to a large degree, some would say it takes violence to really wake people up. How do you respond to that when people say, well, gee, does it take a violent act for you to understand that this is wrong? Your thoughts?
My thoughts is that in this case, violence did this particular, hopefully this turning point right here was one to wake us up. And yes, it was a violent act. That's absolutely true. So I'm not going to argue that fact. But I want to say that nonviolence is not just a one-day act. It's not just a 1 minute fix. It is a long-term development of muscles. And if we don't start practicing it now, we're never going to have a nonviolent future. So it's about seeing where we're at, taking note of it, repercussions. Martin Luther King was against the systems of the evil systems. Militarism was one of the triple evils that he talks about. Correct. Militarization of our law enforcement is something we have to reckon with as a nation. And the element of force that's allowed to use, we have to reckon with this. So when you think of the violence that was perpetrated not only on George Floyd, but all of the names that go on and on, Trayvon Martin, we could name them forever. The violence perpetrated on these folks through law enforcement, part of the system that has to change is the nonviolence education of police in all of our states. And we are working on that, as you know, Stan, and we know that we're working on that. But when you see the response to violence being more violence, how many more lives, how much more are we going to destroy? It just perpetuates itself. Nonviolence is about long-term plans that start in the seat and the heart of every individual. Let's say individuals there watching that, starting to take the images. Thank goodness that was a nonviolent act. There were people who filmed that. That was a nonviolent act. They didn't get in there and throw blows. They used the wits of their brains to capture the moment to help educate the rest of the country. That's a form of nonviolence. Democracy is also a form of nonviolence, and we have to protect.
I want to invite folks who are tuned in to join the chat. If you have any questions or quick comments, you can put them in the chat. I will see them. I would love to have you all. We would love to have you all join the conversation, so feel free to join the conversation. Now, where there is nonviolence, there must be forgiveness. And I'm struck by this man's forgiveness, and not just his forgiveness. I'm struck by Mandela, South Africa, right? The bloodless coup. He comes out of prison. He forgives his captors. In fact, invites them to his wedding, some of his jailers. I mean, you have John Lewis, who Klansman comes to his office years after brutalizing him, and he forgives them. I mean, talk about it both. You think, I mean, the power of forgiveness, and what does forgiveness really mean? That to me is so extraordinary.
Well, you know, there's a couple thoughts. One, John Lewis is remembered because he did not strike back.
Yeah.
And his very peaceful and loving moment profoundly displayed the viciousness, the vulgar viciousness of those police. That's what people remember. Those state troopers were vulgar in their absolute viciousness compared to the peace that he was. So peace won, and Mahatma Gandhi won because it was filled with peace. When you put violence against violence, folks don't remember the people who sacrificed. So violence has its place. Now, as a normal part of the human condition, often we strike back. I will share with you when I marched when I was a kid, and even when I was older, we had to go to training so that we would not fight back. Wow. Because what we had to display was profound peace so that the violence can be exhibited compared to the peace.
What do they teach you? Because again, I find that extraordinary that when you're being beaten, to take a beating like that and really want to put your life on the line for your purpose, for your cause. Not every man can do that. I don't think I can do it.
If I could do this one.
All you do. Yep.
There's, at the very beginning, if one can remember, every single one of the leaders in the civil rights movement was a minister. And so there, in order to do it, there has to be this profound commitment that I can only find through my faith. Because I have to recognize that by offering my body, by offering myself, I'm in control. And the one who is out of control can be seen and then judged because they are out of control and into violence. So in an extraordinary way, John Lewis and those who went before him, who died at the hands of ugliness, the idea of peace was sacred. And so what one does when you go through that training is to begin to recognize that you're in control. It is a sacred moment. It is not one that can possibly be defiled by violence.
I know Bill Dyson is here with us. I want to get one example. When they teach you nonviolence, before I go to Bill Dyson, what kind of things do you teach people, both Deacon and Victoria? What kind of strategies do you teach folks when folks are striking you and beating on you, spitting on you, calling you names? Walk me through. Give us a couple examples.
Examples. I want to take us back to, is Bill Dyson here?
Yeah, he's here. We'll get Bill in a second. I just want to get, before we get Bill, give me one nugget that you tell people, okay, if you're being beaten with a stick, here's what you do. What do you tell them to keep their composure?
I want to take us back to to James Lawson's training back in 1960. You saw that in the film in 1960 in Nashville. And they actually went through incredible role playing. First of all, you do go through role playing when you're learning how to be nonviolent, even if it's in terms of language. When people are assaulting you, you go through role playing. You're taught that you are capable of resisting, withdrawing from the cooperation with evil. You're taught that you are capable of withdrawing your support of a system that's going to oppress you. In other words, if violence is oppressing you and you participate in it, then you're contributing to violence. So you have a higher calling, basically. And as Deacon Miller said, you're showing that you are in control. So self-control is essential to nonviolence. That's number one.
That must take a lot of training.
Well, you know, it does take a lot of training.
It does.
But if you understand what reminds us were those songs, man. I remember sitting in the street and singing "We Shall Overcome." That is some antiquated theme from yesteryear, but it was 1963, before Kennedy was killed, before the "I Have a Dream" speech, all of that. And I remember the police were there with their dogs, and I was holding on, and I lost myself in that song because I knew it was a sacred moment. There's nothing like it. It is one of those things where, as Victoria said, you become a part of something greater than yourself.
Like a spiritual moment, right?
It is. It is profoundly spiritual. Probably the most spiritual moments I've ever had was in those moments when I was unafraid of what might happen.
Wow, that's powerful. All right, Deke, let's keep going there with you on the spiritual moment. So when you're in that moment, when you're feeling like you're part of something bigger while you're being beaten, cussed at, spit at, walk us through what that feels like when you hit that sort of sweet spot where you don't care about the violence, you feel there's a bigger cause.
There became within me this moment of peace, and I remember it, a moment of spiritual peace, that it didn't matter what might be happening, because I was there, one, not necessarily with God, because I didn't understand it that way as I do now, but with all of those who were in the same struggle with me, those I was holding on to. We were looking at each other and crying, not out of fear, but out of the profound, I don't want to say joy, but it was a communal joy that we were right, that this was right. And you could go into any battle like that. Like
Victoria, your thoughts, Victoria, would you agree with that?
Yes, I would definitely agree with that. Absolutely. I'm thinking also of how nonviolence leaders went into jail willingly, were beaten willingly. But I want to also say that John Lewis asked us to do what is right. He asked us to follow that which is right. Being a nonviolence act has many layers in today's world. It's not just throwing your body, the weight of your soul, in front of oppression and being attacked. There are many roles that nonviolence plays, and that is one that is necessary. There's no doubt about it. But there are other roles in terms of supporting legislation, moving in direction to change laws and policies, activating kindness, being radical in your desire not to cause harm. These are things that require discipline and focus and spiritual strength. I agree with Deacon Miller. The leaders were ministers or practitioners of the spiritual path. But in Kingian Nonviolence in 2020, we teach individuals without any spiritual affiliation as well, because we want to appeal to a wide variety. The beloved community, as Dr. Martin Luther King said, is comprised of all sorts of people who have the capacity to be nonviolent, not necessarily just physically be nonviolent. So I think we have to broaden our terms of what nonviolence is as well.
Question for both of you. What has been the most encouraging thing you've seen the last few months? And then we'll go into what the most discouraging thing was. So what has encouraged you in the last few months since the George Floyd situation? Start with you, Victoria, then go to Deke.
Okay, I'll say that my phone, the center's phone, has been ringing off the hook. People that have always thought, okay, Victoria, you're out there, you're in inner cities, you're working with people of color, you're working on nonviolence. Okay, we get that. But now my phone's ringing off the hook. How do we do this? What can we do? Can we do? Yeah. How do we get involved?
Who's calling? Who's calling? What kind of voices are you hearing? Give us a profile. Teachers?
I'm talking about teachers that are calling. I'm talking about a young, there have been about 4 calls from some 20-year-old young white males who knew us growing up or whose parents knew me. And hey, Miss Christgau, you always held the Martin Luther King event in Litchfield County. So, hey, what can we do now? We came to those Martin Luther King events, but wow, what do we do now? And so we encourage them with reading. We encourage them to get on different webinars such as this. We encourage them to watch and read the 1619 Project. You see what I'm saying? So that is extremely encouraging to me.
Education is power, so you try to get them educated. They really want to, how can they help? First thing is improve your knowledge base so you know that you're on the right side of history and the right side of the future, right? That's
exactly. And encouraging them to find a lane. If you really want to work on change in Black Lives Matter, there's any number of lanes you can get into, and just listen and be supportive and follow directions and pay attention. So that's giving me a lot of hope, actually.
Yeah. Deacon Miller, what's giving you hope? What's encouraging you in the last few months?
Yeah. I've got to tell you, I was on a national call of clergy, and they said it's time to stop going to committees. It's time to do something. And when we finally, you know, and I'm 75 years old, I'm done with committees. You know, I don't need a committee to sit around and discuss what I need to do. and that's what Victoria's saying. Folks are saying it's time to do something.
Well, the clergy is so powerful. What kind of things do you think the clergy can do more? Because historically, the clergy has been a major influencers in change. And a lot of times the clergy will sit on their hands just trying to be indifferent on this, or at least saying the right thing, not really taking any action. So what do you want to see clergy do more?
Lead. And as Victoria said, the Connecticut Nonviolence Center is not necessarily spiritually led, but it's a spiritual group.
Yeah.
Spiritual in terms of how they recognize that, and the commonality of spiritual leaders have that one understanding of faith, a profound, deep faith in the human capacity to love. And what ministers and priests and deacons need to do is to begin to be a part of it and smell like the people. You know, in terms of the Old Testament, it was always told that the sheep herders had to smell like the sheep, which meant that they were part of them. And we as clergy must smell like the people. What that means is we're not standing up in the pulpit. We're coming down from the pulpit. You know, for me, church is like a locker room. It's where you go to hear what the game plan is. And then you go out in the field to get in the game. Well, I'm not just going to be a cheerleader. I'm not just going to be a coach. I'm going to be a participant in the game. And that's what we can call people to do, that after Mass is over, now you go, or after church is over, or after the service is over, or after the imam is finished, or the rabbi is finished, or the priest or the clergy is finished. Now it's time to go out and to do the things that we say we do. You got to love your neighbor more than on a Sunday morning.
Let's talk about politics. And on both your worlds, you try not to mix politics with the spiritual component or with the movement. But let's be honest, I mean, John Lewis is very much about getting folks to vote and understanding the power of voting. And Victoria, as you're educating people and getting these young people more quote unquote woke, it makes no difference if people are getting more woke, but not playing a role in getting people who are elected woke. So if you know what I mean. So how do you intersperse politics into your civil rights movement and nonviolence platform?
Well, when you're working with radical love and when you're putting yourself out there, it obviously is going to cross paths with politics, because if you have the wrong political leaders and you have discord in the political leadership, you're going to see it on the ground. And what we're seeing right now, when you asked about how I would be discouraged, I'm so discouraged by our leadership in this country at this present time. And I am personally working toward getting people registered to vote. It's just essential that we move some things around in order for some real change to happen. So it is politics it goes hand in hand. Martin Luther King understood that you can change laws. You can't necessarily change somebody's hearts. And that's
Right.
where the work of the nonviolence practitioner is essential, to help change hearts, but to lead people into their lane, as I said, into their area of skill. Like, let's wake up about what are your skills? Where do you belong? And if you are good at, such as Andrew Clark, whose call we are on right now, look at the work they do to work in legislative moves and to make policy changes. That's essential. So where are we going with that? That's what interests me right now. How can we help with that? How can we get people to participate in government? That's what the Selma March was all about. The right to participate in government was their slogan that crossed that bridge. The right to participate in government. So we have the right to do it, but will we do it? And will we do it in a way that really is for equality? That's what I'm really concerned about.
It takes persistence. Deke, piggyback on that, Deke, on the political part of this, because you've been a bit of a rabble rouser. You mentioned that you got a long rap sheet, right? As long as I heard. So to what degree has the political component been important as you being a spiritual leader and also a civil rights activist? How do you intersperse politics into all that?
Well, it's almost impossible to separate all of who we are. We all wear different hats. I'm an African American. I'm Catholic, and how do I identify who I am? And I can't separate all of them. And one of the things that I concern myself with is which person who is about to be that I'm voting for adheres to the sensibilities that I embrace, that of radical love, that of extraordinary forgiveness.
What is radical love? Both you, Victoria, mentioned radical love. What the heck is that?
Radical love is loving someone who you normally in your humanness you don't want to love.
I love it.
That doesn't mean you
That's hard work.
It is.
That's hard.
Yeah, it is loving those who seem to be unlovable. And the reason that it's vital is because sometimes I'm unlovable. And so one chooses love over anger, over hate, over loathing. And it's choosing and for me to recognize that child, that person was once a little baby and loved by God. And I can't begin to hate what God has created, because I am then, as was said by Mandela, I begin to criticize God when I hate what he created. So that's what radical love is for me, and that is to love. And that's why you see me with people who I may politically disagree with.
Yeah, I saw you with a Klansman on the Facebook page, and I was struck by that. And he was wearing a Trump hat, I believe. So
yes,
it was an extraordinary image. So let's talk about. I didn't ask you, Deacon Miller. What has encouraged you? I think I didn't ask you that question. Last few months, what has encouraged you?
Well, what I had said was that people don't want to go to committees anymore. They want to.
Oh, that's right. That's it. What has discouraged you the last few months?
I still, because a lot of folks know who I am. I still get the idea of when will you be satisfied, or how come you want this? Haven't we come a long way? Why don't you wait? All
right.
of the things that we have heard for generations. And,
what do you say to them? What do you say to those folks?
Well, justice delayed is justice denied, to quote John Marshall, the Supreme Court judge, and that we can no longer wait, as was written about by Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail. Everything can be talked about, but it's discouraging when I find that I am deeply in pain for my people and other folks don't notice.
Victoria, what discouraged you last few months?
I'm on the edge here. I'm extremely hopeful because I have faith, and also because the universe is on the side of justice, which are Dr. Martin Luther King's words, sixth principle. The universe is on the side of justice. It's long, the moral arc is long, but it bends towards justice. But I am also really wanting to see my white brothers and sisters put their, quote, money where their mouth is. I'd like to see them truly take action and come in for the long haul. I think I get discouraged when I say, oh, this is hard, this is tiring. Oh, yeah, hello. You know, it takes a whole lot more than just reading one book to call yourself woke. And I'm concerned about that. I'm so concerned about that. But I do have hope because I have seen more, and the calls keep coming in. So I'm not throwing people that look like me under the bus, but I'm calling them to the table and saying, you want to really sit down, then let's sit down and let's really do this. Let's move it. Keep it moving. Keep it real.
Hey, Stan, I'm on.
Okay, Victoria's called to the table. I'm calling Bill Dyson to the table. Finally, he's here. Hallelujah! The great Bill Dyson. So where do I start? You've heard the conversation. Let me just start with, what kind of trouble have you been getting yourself into lately? Good trouble.
Anyone who's serious is engaged in good trouble every day. You don't just pick a time for it. It's every day. You must live it.
But what issue are you most passionate about right now? I know you're involved in a lot of things. What's your top
issues I'm active on right now are the vast number of people who have been locked away in prison for minor issues, and I'm most concerned about the impact on families, what that does to young people, and what it does to their futures. We scar people. We scar people. Others will say they scar themselves, but we scar people, that we inhibit their growth from that point on because they are unable to move forward with their lives, to get on with their lives. So we have got to change that. We have got to focus attention upon it. We've got to do better than what we're doing. And that's an everyday thing.
And Mr. Dyson, as you know, in Connecticut, it's not just people. In Connecticut, there's a disproportionate impact on Black and brown people. I'll say this again. The prison population in Connecticut is 75% of the inmates are African-American and Latino. Those two groups make up about 28% of the population in Connecticut. It is a gross disparity here in Connecticut, and people don't talk about it enough. I mean, it is a major problem. We'll stay with you, Bill Dyson, as a former powerful lawmaker. I mean, what does that tell you when you have that kind of drastic disparity, 75% in the prisons, yet 28% in the population? What does that tell you?
That we have a lot of work to do. We can't begin to even think that it's over, and that for those things we don't accomplish today, they have got to be done by those who follow us, and we have to make them aware of what those issues are and be examples for them to show them how it is to be done. So that's the role we have. So that means then we have to be about the business of creating problems, being good trouble every day of our lives.
Mr. Dyson, I'm going to stick with you. We're going to make up some time with you. You grew up in the southern states like John Lewis during the sit-ins and the freedom rides. Give us a sense of what life was like back then for a young African-American young man. You grew up in sort of the heat and the teeth of the civil rights movement and of the violence.
Let me tell you how closely John Lewis's life and experiences were to my own. He said that George Floyd wasn't his cause, but that Emmett Till was.
Yes.
And I remember finding out or hearing about Emmett Till when I was 15 years old, standing on a dirt road in front of my house in Wake Forest, Georgia, and I can remember the impact it had on me.
Wow.
That impact was, wow, they can do that to me. And so and the other piece is that John Lewis turned 80 years old. Well, I'm in the same ballpark. John Lewis was engaged in sit-ins in North Carolina. I was doing it in South Carolina. And I saw the same brutal stuff then that I do today. It hasn't changed. I am being taken to jail, and the police had nothing else to do but to kick my cousin who was standing next to me. Nothing ever done about it. And I can associate that with Jimmy Lee Jackson. Jimmy Lee Jackson shot, died, and I think maybe about 4 or 5 months ago, if not in the same time period, that the guy who did the shooting finally admitted, and he never served a day in his life in prison for it. So the battle that we have to wage is one that goes on every day. It's still there. I take note of something that was said earlier about people kind of preparing young people for the future. That is not to disparage the people who have been doing it all their lives. My granddad did it all his life. His offspring were doing it all their lives. Others I knew were doing it all the time. They just had maybe a different way of doing it. But they set the tone for the people of today, and we, I hope, set the tone for people of today. So it's a continuum that we provide. We give the example. We live the examples. We have got to be the standard by which people understand the issues of the day and begin to take action, to act on it.
Again, we'll remind folks in the chat room, if you have any questions, comments, feel free to send them in there. Mr. Dyson, thinking one more time, one more parallel you missed with John Lewis. You both became powerful lawmakers. He was in Congress. You were one of those powerful guys in the state legislature as co-chair of appropriations. What was that like for you, a guy who grew up in the South, who understood racism, who now has a seat, a powerful seat? What was it like dealing with folks who maybe didn't grow up the way you grew up and maybe didn't have the same sort of world experience or life experience with it? What was that like in the suite, so to speak, in Power Suite?
Well, let me tell you what this is like. If we have been taught to dislike each other, separate from each other, then we're not going to meet in the middle. We're not going to be able to share, understand, engage, work together. And that is what John Lewis was doing. He didn't just work with Martin Luther King. He just didn't work with my friend C.T. Vivian. He just didn't work with. You have to be able to reach across the aisle, to reach to others who may not share your view, and have them understand just what it is that you're dealing with. And it requires direct contact, a willingness to do it, a belief that if you persist with it, that you can succeed, you can alter and change people's behavior. You can do what needs to be done to make life better. And we need to teach that to young people so they understand. Not going to happen overnight, but the change comes. It requires work to do that. That's why it's something you have to do every day of your life.
Victoria and Deacon, talk about that whole issue of collaboration and the hard work in finding common ground in people who maybe ostensibly you don't really like.
Without a question of a doubt, that is the nonviolence way. That is the path to build bridges, which we saw John Lewis and others do throughout this whole movement, but also in current times when you see Deacon Miller reaching out to the KKK. You know, I have a neighbor that is a very active supporter of the president, and I have different views about that entirely. And it is on me to continue to that conversation. It's a very difficult conversation, and it's on us to reach out, exactly as Bill says, to other people of different views and see what our commonality is, because there's commonality. There really are. We're living, breathing individuals. We talk about that a lot, and yet actually doing it is very difficult, and it requires incredible discipline. And a desire to see change. Is the only way you can do it.
I'll go back to the anecdote of the Klansman who years later comes back to John Lewis to apologize. It's a powerful anecdote that a man who realized his behavior was terrible, he's evolved to such a degree degree that he wants to come and apologize to the person who he harmed. That seems to be the essence of what you're doing, Victoria, and Deacon Miller. It seems to be the essence of your work. That it may take a while for people to come around, but that if you keep plugging away, that love wins.
Yeah, I would, the man who came back, I think his name was Wilson, who had punched in 1961 John Lewis in the face. It does take a lot of time, and through doing a lot of counseling for people, I have come to realize this, that if I speak with someone about drugs, about gangs, about whatever it might be, I might not be the voice that was necessary that they needed to hear. Maybe it's the fourth voice, and I happen to be the second voice. All that I can do, and all any of us should do, is to recognize that it's the first principle of Dr. King's, and that nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. And so that I have to be a radical, loving person of nonviolence every moment of my day. And one can train yourself to do that. And you train yourself, like with the picture of the guy that I put on Facebook. The important part was to come up to him and say to him something I knew that he would gravitate to. I'm a veteran. And I said, I want you to know I'm a veteran. And I fought and was willing to die for this country so that you could do what you're doing.
What did he say?
He said, well, thank you. And then I said, can I take a picture with you? Because I think it's important for for people to see that there's some way that we can speak together, because there's something in common every one of us has. Mm-hmm. And he agreed, as you saw. And and that's touching that humanity. I have said it before, that the very foundation of relationships is founded in being willingness to be vulnerable. The key to the door of a beloved community is that community, and the members of that beloved community has to be filled, is the key of it, is vulnerableness. When you're vulnerable, you can hear and feel and sense and love without concern of self.
And people also connect with you, right? People also see that as a connection, because you're vulnerable. It makes them feel they can connect with you because you're exposing your vulnerabilities.
And that man who shook the hand of John Lewis, and John Lewis was willing to shake his hand, it took vulnerability, I would believe, more on John Lewis than it did on that man.
Both of them are demonstrating to the communities in which they identify with that here's how you go about the business of being able to share with someone. And that's what it is. You're sharing with somebody that you historically have not gotten along with.
Right.
Yes.
And to share with somebody, that is major stuff, man. Because you're talking about making yourself vulnerable to somebody that you have a history of their not recognizing that at all. So if we're going to get down the road, you better believe there's got to be outreach, reaching out, sharing. And I love those demonstrations that we've had recently about George Floyd. So many different people in the streets, so diverse the group they had, and so much coming together to understand what has to be done.
Yes.
And it speaks volumes to what has taken place. It also speaks volumes to what we can do. And if we take it upon ourselves to try to make that difference, and we take those risks, we can change things.
Amen.
And also, to go on that, Mr. Dyson, you're seeing tangible change. Connecticut recently passed this police accountability bill is a big deal. I mean, this is now, you've taken away the immunity on police. You have responsibility. If another peer police officer sees bad behavior, there's an expectation to report that. There are a lot more accountability measures in there. Your thoughts, get all three of your thoughts. This was a tangible change with about 9 key takeaways. Mr. Dyson, your thought on this new police accountability bill passed in Connecticut?
Let me tell you what that has. I think it's a good thing that it happened. Know that it makes a lot of people upset. And I'm talking about good people upset, not bad people upset. So good people upset feel probably that they are vulnerable now. And vulnerable in terms of how they make their living to support their families, and whether or not through some fluke they may run the risk of losing that. And I'm talking about the good ones with that. Now the bad ones, they need to have whatever it is that we can do to have them be accountable. Now at the same time, I want you to know that the people we're talking about are both black and white in the same group that have some of the same issues. How then are we to deal with it if we are not about the business of engaging in a dialogue to talk about what it is and to demand the accountability and have people understand that you know what it is they're dealing with? And
well,
that
vulnerability.
Now,
yeah, go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
And I think that's in essence does it. It says it's good, but I know that it probably makes a lot of people uneasy, you know, and that's the thing that we have to engage in some dialogue to try to work through.
You know, from listening to you, all of you, I'm hearing a couple of things. That vulnerability is sort of a key element of change. And in order to have change, I hear Deacon mention vulnerability, Mr. Dyson mentioned vulnerability. So, Victoria, you have to have some level of vulnerability in order to create common ground. It sounds like you need some vulnerability. People got to feel a little uneasy in order to get to accountability. That am I overstating that?
No,
no, you're not. And for me, you're not overstating it. I think if you're going to do something to bring about change, and I mean substantive change, it's going to require everybody giving up something. Everybody giving up something to make sure that we get to a place that we can all agree on.
Yes.
Now, I would ideally love to have everything there is to be had. Well, realization tells me I can't. You know, that I have got to deal with my expectations, and other people on the other side of that spectrum have got to deal with their expectations. Things are not going to be the way they were before. So the change has got to happen here if we are going to live in peace and be able to understand what it is that each group is dealing with and come to understand what it is that we need to do.
Well, final thoughts. I want to get next steps, a quick next step from each of you. You see now the accountability bill. You know, you have police officers being arrested. Some say there are 2 steps, justice for the crimes committed, and then policy change. What's the important next step for each of you? Start with Deacon Miller. What's the next step you want to see?
Well, I'm not going to join a committee.
You made that clear.
I am so inspired by both Victoria and Brother Boyd, is it?
Dyson.
Bill
Dyson.
Yeah, Brother Dyson, just a joy. I am going to today and tomorrow, I'm going to continue to commit to find someone who it's difficult to love and build a bridge. And I do that and try to do that absolutely every single day.
All right, Victoria, next step for you.
Next step, involve more people in truth, dialogue, and conversation, and bring people of differences together. That's my work. That's what we're going to continue to do. I'd like to see more people trained, really trained, and understand Kingian nonviolence. I want to encourage people to come for trainings and build those bridges to those dialogues as well.
Bill Dyson, next step for you.
I think it's important that the next thing we do is that we engage in the practice of speaking out for every issue that we deem to be wrong. Speak out so that you're heard, not observe something and go silent, not say anything. Speak out, say something. And I think if we do that, we're bound to come to some understanding about what it is that we need to do and what we can accomplish in the process. So we need to speak out. Speak out, speak out.
And as John Lewis said, to two quotes, see something, say something, do something, and also find a way to get in the way. So, Mr. Dyson, your words were appropriate because it really sums up the theme of this whole conversation. John Lewis was about speaking up and doing something. Andrew Clark, director here at IMRP, we're about closing up. I know you want to have some closing thoughts, but I want to thank the panelists. You all were tremendous. We did apologize for the technical glitches, but you all really had some robust and some heartfelt insight on this issue. And thank the folks who tuned in and were patient with us. We normally don't have those kind of glitches.
Appreciate having you here, Stan.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Mr. Andrew Clark will wrap things up for us. Andrew?
Thank you so much, Stan. Yes, and appreciate everyone's kindness. Such a tremendous conversation, and I think a real fitting tribute to Congressman Lewis and the conversation that we were trying to have today. And you know, Deacon Miller, I started working with Bill at the legislature 20 years ago, and I hadn't met him until that point. And he's historically, he was a teacher. And I wasn't all that familiar with the legislative process, and he taught me those ways of reaching out, of speaking your truth, but not doing it in a way that you're trying to win, not doing it in a way that you're pointing fingers at someone, but just trying to get to a better place and making sure that everybody's at the table. And Victoria, when I got to work with you, and, you know, I grew up I was born in 1971, and I wasn't as well versed in the civil rights movement until I started working with your center and started to understand exactly what that meant. And I said to myself, holy cow, I was working with a guy for so long, and he's nonviolence personified. He is John Lewis. He's the Martin Luther King. He's obviously the Deacon Miller, too. And the thing about these types of people that I would say is that when you're in a room with them, it's nothing but wisdom and love that you feel. And you know, people go through life and they get older, but not everybody gains wisdom. Not everybody does it without fear. Not everybody does it through vulnerability. And not everybody is able to exude compassion and love for people that you all do, and that John Lewis did. And I think that is a testament to a way of life. And I think you guys did a great job today about sharing that. And just one more thing, in terms of Deacon Miller, you said it, and Bill referenced it, you know, the 5% of the population that marched in the civil rights movement versus the 25% now. You know, and Bill's passion is prison reentry, and we've been doing a lot of work with other countries who do it a heck of a lot better than us. And we were on the phone with a woman in the correctional center in Norway, and this was about less than a month ago, and she was talking about, well, they were protesting in downtown Oslo. And I said, oh, and she said there was many more people than they realized would show up, and it was during the middle of the coronavirus, and they were hoping that there would be fewer people. And I said, oh, were they protesting the police in Norway? She said, no, we were supporting you in the US. And so this is an international phenomenon that we just have a moment to be able to make complete change happen. And I'm very, 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 and the other thing about same thing with John Lewis, the same thing I could tell with Deacon Miller and Victoria is your internal optimist. Some people, I'm sure, always would maybe even view you on the side of naive, but you have the experience to back up that you've accomplished things, and yet you still remain optimistic in the heat of all of the struggle that you've been involved in. And so it's just so inspirational, and I thank everybody. I thank everybody for participating today, and we look forward to continuing our relationships and the conversations moving forward. And thank you, Stan.
Andrew, can I add one thing? I didn't realize that Deacon Miller's rap sheet was so long. You got quite a record. Thank you, everybody.
I'm proud of it, brother.
Hey, thank you, guys. Hey, thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Hey, thank you.